Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. It's so nice to have you with us today. We're going to spend an hour and we're going to talk about what we all think about what's going to happen in 2023. And so I hope you'll stay with us. We come to you like this every 2 weeks from the Arlington Institute. It's located here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little resort town down the road from Baltimore and Washington. And we come together, four of us, to kind of look out at the big changes that are happening in the world today and where this is all going at the time of the most extraordinary kind of shift in human history. And we're joined, as we are most times, by Gregg Braden. Hello, Gregg Braden. Nice to have you back.
John, it's good to see you. I've been out of the country for the last 3 weeks in the Middle East, and I'm really happy to be back and happy to be with everyone. And Mark is new with us today. I'm happy to be with Mark on this program as well.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to see you. Penny Kelly in Michigan. I suppose it's cold and snowy up there, yes?
It was miserable, absolutely miserable. It's better today. We have sunshine, so warming up. We're going to warm up. We might get to 40.
Well, great. And lamentably, Kingsley Dennis is off doing family holiday kind of things today, and we're happy to have Mark Gober with us, author who is sitting in for Kingsley today. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi, John. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be back with the group, and nice to meet you, Greg.
Good. Well, and we do this, as I say, every 2 weeks as we try to make some sense and dig deeply into the underpinnings of this amazing kind of change that's going on in the world right now. So let's get to the topic today. We're here to talk about 2023 and 2023 and what might be on the table for us all. If we could just drive some stakes into the ground to say, go out a little further, 2025, and say, what are the indicators about where we're going toward? And Martin Armstrong, whose computer's never been wrong and has been doing this for 40 years, says that World War III starts this next year. And by 2025, it's a global civil war where there's a general uprising across the planet against governments by people all over. So that's what you sit and put a stick in your mind. That just drive a stake out there on the horizon and you say, this is where it appears that we're going. And then you start to ask yourself questions and say, so what is it that would contribute to a global civil war where there would be an uprising against governments all over the place in the next 2 years? I mean, this is kind of a rapid kind of unnecessarily, by definition, an unraveling of the status quo, everything that we've known, everything that we've done. And what the remote viewers say that the key kind of component and the key idea that is kind of on the underpinnings of this, widespread fraying of the system is the quote betrayal. That in fact that the people across the planet rise up against their governments because they feel they have been betrayed. Armstrong kind of encapsulates and summarizes 2023 as being, quote, the year from hell. He says that this is like nothing we've ever seen before, and it's being driven by some really big things like the central banks have been, and countries all over the world have overextended themselves so much that they'll never be able to pay anything back, and all the interests and other things are coming due. And what they're trying to do is collapse the whole system. And this is Dmitry Medvedev, who was the former president of Russia. And he says, oh, it's the time of the year that do predictions. So I think I'm going to give some predictions. And he says, number one, and I'll just read through these for you. Number one, the increase in oil prices will go to $150 a barrel, and gas prices will go to $5,000 per 1,000 cubic meters. He says the UK will return to the European Union, and then the European will collapse after the return of the UK. and the abolition of the euro as the currency of the former EU. He says this is just next year, right? And then there will be next year a war between France and the Fourth Reich, the partition of Europe, including, and then there'll be a partitioning of Europe, including a new partition of Poland. And then he says there will be a civil war in the United States, a separation of California and Texas into independent states, creation of a union of the state of Texas and Mexico, the subsequent victory of Elon Musk during the U.S. presidential election. The point isn't to fixate on the individual things, but get the sense of the upheaval and the disruption that this intelligent, knowledgeable, informed man sees coming downstream. And so what I'd like to do very quickly is run through a list of things that I think that are going to happen and let this be the setup for our discussion. I think that it's inevitable next year that there are going to be some extraordinary science breakthroughs. And particularly, it's likely to be in the areas of the storage and batteries and things, among other things for sure. There's a lot of work going on there, and there's a lot of need for that. There's going to also be some extraordinary and interesting materials science breakthroughs. And we don't need to go into all of that, but the idea that you can have new materials to do all kinds of things you could never do before is clearly in the works. It's already started. I'm guessing that there will be a war between the U.S. and Russia, which will begin the beginning of World War III, and that there will be discoveries and secrets that will be revealed from out of the classified and black program areas around energy and communications, particularly communications around scalar technology. The central banks, there are lots of indications that say in the financial area that central banks are going to fail. If they can't pull off this great reset, and there's plenty of reasons to believe that they can't, they won't be able to, then the banks will start to come apart, and that with all of the kind of secondary effects of that. There certainly will be an attempt to do digital currencies in the United States and other countries as well. There's going to be food and energy shortages, first in the UK, in the EU, in Europe, and they've already started and they're already being set up, and energy, both food and in terms of energy. In the United States, for instance, it seems to be manipulated and contrived. They've burned down over 100 food processing plants in the U.S. alone, and now they're blowing up power plants. They've done quite a few of them in the U.S. There's going to be significant progression in terms of alien disclosure. This is also on a fast track. And I know from personal experience now recently that there are things going on that most people have no idea about.
When I look at the world as it's unfolding right now, the comforting thing to me is that every one of the problems that we're facing are human induced. It's not nature turning against us. And it means humans are causing it. Humans could stop it in a heartbeat. It's an inside job from within our own civilization. And I find a little comfort in that, knowing that it's us, not the world around us, that is causing the ripples in our conscious choices that we're making right now. I think for 2023, everything you said, I think is all possible. Now, I think to really encapsulate this, if we want to see where 23 is going, I think the template is the Great Reset. And I think China is the model that the Great Reset is trying to emulate in the European Union and certainly in the United States. And that covers a lot of ground. So these are a handful of unelected people who believe that they have a vision for the world. The problem is there are multiple competing visions based upon multiple competing agendas that are being imposed upon our society, and perhaps what I think is probably the greatest social engineering experiment in the history of civilization. We've never seen social engineering happening on this level. So the goal is to achieve these things by the year 2030. The UN has stated that. I think 2023 is the year where they're going to start with the big pieces. Probably what I'm seeing very clearly is the financial institutions. And I think we will see, it's already happening. It started in late 23 or 22. They're trying to digitize the dollar. They did it 3 experimental cities within the last couple of weeks here in the United States. And they'll be doing others. And the control mechanisms that go around that, with John, you mentioned the social credit system that China is using right now. The EU has already said they like that system. They would like for that system for themselves. What it's doing, John, is it is driving a parallel society to emerge because a growing number of people are not going to comply. And it's a choice everybody's going to have to make. It's going to be pretty hard to sit on the fence for these things. And I think what we're seeing is now the seeds of a parallel society where we have a financial system based on blockchain technology that is outside of the traditional banking system and the central banks. And I think this is going to be a key, because if you can't control the money, it's hard to control anything else.
What I have been really focused on is the change in consciousness and seeing, because if there's no change in consciousness, we're not going to have any changes that we can count on in the world around us. Where I would start is that what I see is that there's a big change coming. It's a very good change. It's a change that eventually leads to the decision on the part of a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, that they're tired of the, quote, national government system. There's not even an interest in pushing back against that. There's just this interest in, no, we're doing this over here. Good luck with that over there, guys. We're doing this. And there is also one of the things that I have was kind of surprised at. This was just an out and out vision. I'll share it. That Cliff High had said that there was some uptick in emotions from mid-December on. And then that went up again dramatically in January. And then it went off the charts as we moved into the rest of the year. So I had in the back of my head this question, what would cause that? And there were all sorts of things that presented themselves. I rejected most of those. But then back at the beginning of December, I had this little vision in which I saw that the case, Brunson versus Alma Adams, was going to the Supreme Court, that they were going to decide whether or not they would hear that case. Cutting right to the chase, what did I see was that that decision, the relevance of that decision was going to strike people in mid-December, and that the Supreme Court would decide to hear the case, and that was the reason for the bump up of tremendous emotions in January, and that that decision to hear the case would result in in what I'll call the decision in favor of Brunson. So that then the Supreme Court decides in favor of Brunson, which then is this humongous turning point for the consciousnesses of the United States, and probably the trigger for the World War or the Civil War. When that happens, let's go back to Brunson v. Alma, when that decision is made, the president, the vice president, Pelosi, and 385 members of the House of Representatives are removed. And that then explained to me why Dick Allgaier and his remote viewers group had been given this task to look at some point in time in the future. And what they saw was the members of Congress were crying, they were sobbing, they were passing out, some of them were vomiting. And there was this phrase that they used, which was, it's over, it's all closing down. And the sense was that the government was over. And that then is the setup for why I kept seeing in my own looking ahead, look-sees, wow, there's something big happens in January, big, really big, and we end up with martial law. What I see in 2023 is that there's this tremendous relief in terms of the court system, but it doesn't quite play out the way that those who win would hope. But a lot of the other stuff that I've been seeing is that the consciousness of people, and I'll close with this, has this, I'm going to call it a tremendous boost and excitement of kind of, woohoo, what's possible here? What can we do now? That all old stuff, that awful stuff is off our back. Let's create something new. That results in a whole lot of excitement.
I do feel like there is a paradigm shift occurring, at least for some part of the population. And a huge aspect of all of this is around the accessibility of information and what will be censored and what's not censored, and how much people will look around the mainstream media to find out what's actually happening. And it seems like there's more of that's becoming more acceptable in the mainstream, and the media seems to want to put a lid on information that comes out. But I continue to see this battle over information, which seems fundamental to all of the shifts. But John, I agree with you. I think on the UFO topic, there will be more disclosure of some sort, although I wonder how the information will be framed strategically by the powers that be. So I don't necessarily trust that the information will be comprehensive, but it seems to be more acceptable in the mainstream to even discuss that topic, which is a big shift. And it seems like that will continue. On the broader control system and the Great Reset that is in process, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think a lot about the digital currency, and in particular the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, which would have the potential to be programmed, meaning that people would be able to buy or not buy things based on what the government says. So if you say something on social media that violates the what they like, they could say, well, you're only going to be able to spend this much money, or you won't be able to buy certain types of food. So this is a way of potentially controlling people. And however, if there is a digital currency on the blockchain that's outside of the government system, like Greg was alluding to, that would free people in many ways. So to me, the digitization is a concern if it's within the governmental system. If it's outside of it, then that allows for more freedom. I've also been thinking a lot about the climate narrative. I remember hearing a recording in April 2021 from Project Veritas. This was of a CNN technical director who was talking about how, as COVID was dying down, because at the time COVID was still hot, the network would focus on climate. And the purpose was to bring about fear. And he even said, fear sells. He said, unlike COVID, this one has longevity. So he was very explicit about that. And we've seen the transition as COVID is less in the media, although it's still there. Climate is more of a focus. And my concern with the narrative is that it could be used to control movement and control human behavior. The president of Alibaba, there's a recording of him saying they're working on individualized carbon footprint trackers, where your movement could be controlled, or just basically you don't have the same freedom based on how much energy you're consuming. So like any potential crisis, there's the potential for weaponization. And it seems like climate is being moved in that direction. And along those lines, there is a continued push for ESG, environmental, social, and governance, which is a big part of the Great Reset narrative, which is that companies and countries need to abide by certain principles related to environmental, social, and governance issues, which sounds really good. And in many ways, I like that theme. However, there's a very specific version of it being implemented by an unelected group that is working through governments to control businesses and control behavior again. my continued question is how much that will be resisted by the people, whether they'll recognize what's happening and say no and delay a lot of these initiatives, or whether they will allow them to happen. And perhaps we'll have a split, because as I see the world, there people are living in different realities. Two people could look at the same thing, and one person could say that's evil, and another person could say, wow, I'm so happy that's happening.
So is the information war winnable?
Everything that we're talking about is important. It's in all of our lives. It's up for us. And there is a level where it's all noise. It's all a distraction for the ultimate. There is a battle for our thoughts, and that's what we're talking about here. There's a battle for our beliefs, and we're talking about that. Mark alluded to the ultimate battle, and it's the focus of every program that I've done, the new content coming out. There is a battle for our humanness. And all of this is to gain access to our humanness. And there's a portion of our humanness that's called divinity. The definition of divinity is the ability to transcend perceived human limitations. So in other words, when we live the full potential of our humanness, we're extraordinary beings, and we are no longer vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas that we're talking about. So ultimately, all of these things are keeping much of the human population in fear, and that fear is what keeps us from our divinity. For me, all this is true. It's all happening. It's all driving us to come to terms with who we are. And the way that you win this battle is simply by being the best version of yourself. When we are the best version of ourselves, we've won that battle without even fighting the battle.
As you were speaking, Greg, you reminded me of a quotation from one of the Nag Hammadi scriptures that really rings true to me. And these were scriptures written roughly 2,000 years ago, discovered in a jar in 1945 and translated in the 1970s. Talking in some of the scriptures, they talk about origins of humanity. And there's one tale in the Nag Hammadi scriptures called The Nature of the Rulers. And the quotation goes something like this: the rulers kept humanity in a state of confusion and a life of toil so that they would be distracted with the things of the world and not have time to be occupied with the Holy Spirit.
Thank you all for this provocative conversation. Here at the Arlington Institute, we also do transition talks where we bring speakers into Berkeley Springs, and then we live stream them all over once a month. And we have a wonderful lineup, and you can find out information about that at arlingtoninstitute.org. Both Greg and Penny will be with us again this year, later in the year. And so you got that to look forward. We all have that to look forward to. And so thank you all for who are viewers, who are following this, and we very, very much appreciate it. Thank you for all of you on the panel. And we'll be back again on Quartet 2 weeks from now. Take care. Happy New Year to you all.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.